Your savings are trapped. And I don't mean they're tied up in a bad investment. I mean they're technically trapped. The financial system designed to hold your money has been transformed into a control grid, one that can stop you from moving your wealth precisely when you need it most. And here's the terrifying part. This isn't a flaw in the system. It's a feature. It's a feature that activates during the final stage of a debt supercycle. And all the evidence shows that the activation sequence has already begun. The comparison to 1929 isn't a metaphor. We're in the same structural position, following the same mathematical progression, and watching the same institutional behaviors. But there's one critical difference. The financial control tools available today are exponentially more sophisticated than anything that existed back then. Your grandfather could pull his cash out of a failing bank and hide it under his mattress. You can't. Your wealth is just an electronic entry in a database that can be frozen, restricted, or confiscated with a single keystroke. I'm about to show you a pattern so reliable, so mathematically precise, that once you see it, our current moment will become crystal clear. It's called the four-stage debt supercycle collapse pattern, and it has governed every major financial crisis in modern history. Right now, we are deep into stage 4, the capital control and elite exit phase, and the signs are everywhere, if you know what to look for. Let's break down the mechanism, because understanding this pattern is the only way to truly grasp why your savings are no longer completely yours. Stage 1 is credit expansion and artificial prosperity. The cycle starts when a financial system grows faster by creating credit than by actual production. Banks lend, people spend, and asset prices go up. Rising prices then justify even more lending, creating more spending, and driving prices even higher. This creates the illusion of wealth, but it's really just leverage building up in the system. Crucially, during this stage, capital flows freely. Money moves easily across borders, between different assets, and in and out of banks. This freedom is essential because it encourages capital to enter the system. You can't build a trap until the capital is inside. Stage 2 is peak leverage and systemic fragility. At this point, credit expansion hits its mathematical limits. Paying off debt starts to consume a huge percentage of income. New loans are needed just to service old debts. The system becomes incredibly fragile. But here's what makes stage 2 so dangerous. The system looks strongest right before it breaks. Stock markets hit all-time highs. Real estate values peak. The public sees incredible prosperity, while the underlying math has already turned terminal. Stage 3 is credit contraction and a deflationary cascade. Something breaks. A bank fails, a market crashes, a loan can't be rolled over. The credit cycle reverses. People can't get new loans to pay off old ones. They start selling assets to raise cash. Prices fall. Falling prices trigger margin calls and forced sales, which makes prices fall even faster. Suddenly, everyone wants out at the same time, but the exits are far too narrow for the crowd. Stage 4 is capital controls and elite extraction. This is the endgame. As the deflationary spiral accelerates, authorities impose controls that trap capital inside the failing system. These controls can be anything from withdrawal limits and transfer restrictions to banking holidays and wealth taxes. The official reason is always to ensure systemic stability. The real function is to prevent the public from pulling their money out while the architects of the system quietly move their own wealth to safety, using methods you and I can't access. Now, let me prove this pattern with 2 historical examples that perfectly mirror what we're facing today. First, the 1929 crash and the Great Depression. Stage 1 ran through the roaring 20s. Credit expanded dramatically. You could buy stocks with just 10% down. Consumer credit exploded. The Federal Reserve kept rates low, and capital flowed freely. The Dow Jones shot up 500% between 1924 and 1929. This wasn't real growth. It was leverage disguised as prosperity. Stage 2 peaked in the summer of 1929. Credit had reached its limits, but the system looked stronger than ever. Stock prices hit record highs in September. Leading economists declared a permanently high plateau. The public saw prosperity. The math saw a system about to implode. Stage 3 was the crash. October 1929 kicked off the credit contraction. Stock prices fell 25% in just 4 days. Margin calls forced sales, driving prices lower, triggering more margin calls. By 1930, it was a full-blown deflationary cascade. Bank runs began, and thousands of banks failed. Stage 4 was the capital control phase. In 1933, as the banking crisis reached its peak, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102, making it a crime for private citizens to own gold. Americans were forced to surrender their gold for $20.67 an ounce. The government then immediately revalued it to $35, effectively confiscating 69% of their purchasing power. But before that order, between 1930 and 1932, the wealthy and connected were quietly converting their dollars to gold and moving it offshore. The Morgans, the Rockefellers, the major banking families, they knew Stage 4 was coming. By the time the government trapped everyone else's money, their wealth was already safe. The banking holiday of March 1933 closed every bank, trapping deposits. When they reopened, there were strict withdrawal limits. Your money was no longer your money. Let us look at a more recent case that used modern control tools. The Cyprus banking crisis of 2013. Stage 1 took place from 2004 to 2010. Cyprus became a hub for foreign deposits, and its banks lent out money aggressively. The banking sector grew to 8 times the country's GDP. Capital flowed in without any restrictions. The trap needs bait. Stage 2 peaked between 2010 and 2012. The Greek debt crisis wiped out the value of Cypriot banks' assets. The banks were insolvent, but they stayed open and kept taking deposits. To the public, everything looked normal. The math showed terminal fragility. Stage 3 hit in early 2013. Cyprus needed an EU bailout. But during the negotiations, capital flight sped up, particularly from accounts held by people connected to the process. Large deposits quietly left the country. The architects were getting out. Stage 4 was the bail-in and capital controls. On March 16, 2013, Cyprus announced that depositor accounts would be seized to save the banks. All banks were closed. When they reopened, capital controls were in place. A $300 daily withdrawal limit, no wire transfers abroad, and limits on credit card payments. These controls lasted for 2 years, but bank records later showed that in the weeks before the announcement, over $4 billion left Cyprus through politically connected accounts. The exits were sealed, but only after the architects had already left. Both cases show the exact same mechanism. Credit expands freely, leverage peaks silently, the system contracts, and then capital controls trap the public while insiders get their wealth out. So why are your savings trapped right now, as we head into 2026? Stage 1 was the everything bubble from 2008 to 2021. Zero interest rates and quantitative easing created the largest credit expansion in human history. And critically, capital flowed freely. The system was open because it was still gathering capital for the trap. Stage 2 peaked in 2021-2022. We hit maximum leverage. Total U.S. debt grew to over 350% of GDP. But the system looked strongest right then. Stock markets and real estate values hit all-time highs. The public saw prosperity. The math saw terminal fragility. Stage 3 is what we're living through right now. The interest rate hikes in 2022 and 2023 broke the credit cycle. Regional banks failed. Commercial real estate is collapsing. The deflationary cascade is beginning, even if it's being hidden by government spending and media spin. And Stage 4 is being executed right now. This is where your savings become trapped. The control mechanisms are already in place. The Federal Reserve is developing CBDC technology. Programmable money that can be frozen, restricted, or even expired based on policy decisions. Bail-in legislation now explicitly authorizes the seizure of your deposits to save failing banks, just like in Cyprus. Your savings seem liquid because the system is still functioning, but all the tools are in place to restrict, freeze, or confiscate your capital the moment the authorities decide it's necessary. The trap is built, it just hasn't been publicly activated yet. But here's the proof that Stage 4 is already happening. Institutional capital has been quietly repositioning. Family offices have increased their holdings of physical assets and moved money into offshore structures. Central banks around the world have been buying gold at the fastest pace since 1950. Sovereign wealth funds have been reducing their exposure to U.S. treasuries. The architects are leaving quietly, using channels you and I don't have. Let's check the boxes. Is debt at unsustainable levels? Yes, over 350% of GDP. Has leverage peaked and started contracting? Yes. Credit growth has turned negative in real terms. Are capital control mechanisms in place? Yes. The surveillance, the reporting requirements, the bail-in laws. Are the architects repositioning? Yes. Institutional gold buying and offshore movement confirm it. Stage 4 is executing. The deflationary cascade will accelerate. More banks will fail. And at some point, probably during a crisis that requires emergency measures, the capital controls that are currently dormant will be activated. Withdrawal limits, forced conversions, wealth taxes, or bail-ins. The infrastructure to trap your savings is already built and waiting. The comparison to 1929 is mathematically precise. Same debt dynamics, same credit cycle, same institutional behaviors. But the coming years will be worse in one critical respect. In 1929, you could pull your cash and hide it. Today, your wealth exists as an entry in a surveilled database. The system knows where every dollar is and can restrict it with algorithmic precision. Pattern recognition beats prediction every time. And the pattern is telling you that the exits are closing, that your savings are trapped in a system designed to prevent escape, and that the architects who understand this have already repositioned their own wealth. The trap doesn't announce itself. It only reveals itself when you try to leave and discover you can't. By then, it's too late. Your savings aren't trapped by accident. They're trapped by design. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that looks beyond the headlines.